Good afternoon. Happy Sunday. Happy first day of September. Yay! I'm so excited for autumn to be on its way. I have had it with the summer heat. I know some people really like it, but I am not one of those. So, it's been a couple of days since I've done some reviews, and I've been really excited to do some book reviews for a while, and I already did one with Pagan Ethics. That was a little heavy. So today we're going to go more into recreation reading. Yay, recreation! So I thought that I would start off with one of my favorite authors of all time, Alice Hoffman. Now, Alice Hoffman is probably best known for writing Practical Magic, which I also plan to review in October, along with the prequel, The Rules of Magic. Both of them very fantastic books. And pretty much everything that she writes is really good, but today I wanted to talk about the very first book of hers I ever read, which put me on the path of Alice Hoffman fandom for life. And that book is one of her older ones, Here on Earth by Alice Hoffman. And this is the very first book of hers I ever read. It's also the same copy, which is rare for me because a lot of times when I find something that I really love, I often give it away to other people so that they can enjoy it and then just rebuy the book. So that way I get to support that author over and over again and share their work with everyone. But I've actually kept this one. So a little backstory on how I found this book. I was living with my grandmother at the time. I think I was like either 18 or 19 years old. I'd moved into my grandma's basement. And I was perusing all of her books, of which she has many. She's a great reader like me. And I came across this one. And I started reading it. And it wasn't until I was like deep in the book that I realized that this is a retelling of Wuthering Heights. So if you're a Wuthering Heights fan, you may enjoy this retelling in our modern times of the Wuthering Heights story of, Heathcliff and Cathy. But this one also has a lot of really interesting additions, and it's just a good story on its own. So whether or not you like Wuthering Heights, it doesn't really matter. This is still a really good book either way. Let me just read you the back. So it says, the best-selling author of Practical Magic and Turtle Moon, both really good books, now tells her most seductive and mesmerizing story yet. After 19 years in California, March Murray returns to the small Massachusetts town where she grew up, and for all this time, March has been avoiding her own troubled history. But when she encounters Hollis, this is the Heathcliff character, the boy she loved so desperately, the man who has never forgotten her, the past collides with the present as their reckless love is reignited. The dark, romantic tale asks whether it is possible to survive a love that consumes you. The answers that March Murray discovers are both heartbreaking and wise, as complex as they are devastating. For in heaven and in our dreams, love is simple and glorious, but it is something altogether different here on earth. Hence the title. So the March Murray character is the Cathy version in this retelling of the Wuthering Heights. And it's not like 100% just like I'm going to take Wuthering Heights and put it in our current times and that's the story. It actually takes a lot of twists and turns and divulges a little bit from that original Bronte tale. I really loved this book because I have a kind of weakness for stories about love gone wrong. I know that sounds terrible, but like especially stories of lovers that are separated for whatever reason and then reunited, and this is one of those, and it's a really good one. And the main character, March Murray, she's kind of enigmatic and a little mysterious and a little strange, and I like that about her as well. And then the Heathcliff character, who is Hollis in this, he's kind of a real, bastard later in the story, but when he's a young boy and you see like all of these traumas happening to him, kind of explains why he ends up that way later. And so even though he can be a real jerk in certain parts of the book and a very dark character, the tale of like what happened to him when he was a boy kind of helps you understand that. It doesn't excuse it by any means, but it helps you understand it a little bit more. And then there are all of like very similar characters. Like there's a Judith Dale in place of the housekeeper from the Wuthering Heights. There are the children of the Heathcliff and Cathy characters, and also the side characters. So there's a relationship between the cousins later, and that's beautiful. But another thing that I really love about Alice Hoffman's writing is that she has these really vivid and beautiful descriptions and wonderful ways of explaining things. So I've often said that if I were going to write, and I've written a few things, and those things are all based here in Ogden, because that's the place that I know and I could really describe vividly and in detail. I feel like Alice Hoffman does that same thing with Massachusetts and these little towns like outside of Boston that are less well known. So she's a really, really good describer of New England in Massachusetts. So even though I've never visited there a day in my life, from having read so many of these Alice Hoffman books, I feel like I know the place. She's just really, really good at describing towns and the people within them and getting all of the sights and scents in. So I really appreciate that about her as well. So I was going to read you the very first chapter, and then I thought, no, I don't want to give too much away right off the bat. But there's one chapter in the very middle of the book, chapter 7. And this is mostly dealing with the children. So the Heathcliff character in this book, whose name is Hollis, he has a nephew who is March's brother's son, who loses him for reasons I won't get into yet. He's raising him. So he's very much the Hareton character, and his name is Hank. And then March's daughter Gwen is also there. Anyway, it's getting a little convoluted, but I'll just read you some of this chapter because I want you to experience the richness of the way she writes. So it goes like this. At twilight, Fox Hill is the most beautiful place on earth, with its long blue views of Guardian Farm and its twisted black trees. Hank comes here often at this time, accompanied by the dogs, who are unusually subdued at this hour, as if they knew that bickering and snapping would be a crime against the silence down below. Most of the time, Hank considers himself to be too obvious and too tall, but here on the hill, he is small and extremely well aware of his own insignificance. What is the difference between himself and a single blade of grass? Isn't that great? So like Walt Whitman-y to me. That's probably not a proper description, but it feels very like Walt Whitman. Like, what is the difference between himself and a single blade of grass? The grass, as he sees it, is worth 1,000 times more than he is, since it serves a purpose. And hard as he's tried, Hank has never been able to figure a single reason for his existence. All he's ever been is a problem, a burden. But there must be a reason for this life that he has. There's got to be. After all, he is here just as surely as the fields he walks across. He is breathing this sweet October air. Sometimes when he stops thinking of himself as Hollis's adopted nephew and his father's only son, Hank has the sense that there might be something worthwhile inside of him. It is possible that no one perceives the world the way he does, or views this landscape with the clarity with which he sees. This alone would be a reason for him to exist. When he thinks about the idea of his own singular vision, the world suddenly seems filled with endless possibilities, and he wonders if this is what hawks experience at the moment of flight. Expectation. That's what it is. The kind you feel when you're 17, and the air is cold and fresh, and the dogs lie down beside you in the grass, and everything is quiet, the way it always is right before something is about to happen. The evening star rises into the dark blue night, but this star is only the beginning, like opening the cover of a book, but not yet turning the first page. Below in the pastures, there used to be dozens of horses, including the thoroughbred named Tarot's Deck of Fortune, who was once entered into both the Preakness and the Belmont Stakes in a single year. Hank found a photograph forgotten in the barn, crammed between two stalls. When he saw the image of Tarot draped in blue and white silks, Hank actually cried. He wished he had lived at the farm in Mr. Cooper's time. He's heard from some of the older residents of the village that the ground used to shake when the horses ran together. You could feel it all the way in town. The floors of the bakery and the hardware store used to vibrate so badly that several residents were convinced that the village was prone to earthquakes. So that's the beginning of chapter 7. Chapter 7 is like a huge moment in the book in a lot of ways, and I won't read much more because I want to leave it to you, but I find her way of describing things so very beautiful. And, oh man, there's another chapter here too. Like, I read it to my husband last night because I thought it was so pretty. I wish I would have bookmarked that for you guys. But she has a beautiful, it's just pretty language. And the stories themselves are compelling. And I love when you can wed compelling stories with also very beautiful and articulate ways of describing things. I find that rare. And so when I find an author that can do both of those things, they kind of hook onto them and stay with them for life. I'm a strange reader in that way, that like if I find a writer who, like, I'll read a book of theirs and I absolutely love it, I'll be a fan for life. I will pick up and buy and read their books forever, just because the one thing of theirs that I read was so amazing that I'll just stick with them forever. And that was definitely the case with this book. So I highly recommend it. Oh, it was on Oprah's book club. So apparently she liked it as well. It was a bestseller. And I plan to review some other books of hers, particularly Practical Magic and, like I said, The Rules of Magic. Those are some of my favorites as well. Maybe I'll review some of her young adult fiction as well, because there's some really wonderful ones that she's written for young people too. And I really love this book, especially in the autumn time. I really like reading Alice Hoffman. Like, whenever I start reading one of her books, I just feel this overwhelming urge to get myself a big glass of Merlot and start listening to, like, Mazzy Star or something and delve in with some dark chocolate. It's one of those things. It's that kind of experience. So, yeah, I highly recommend it. Again, this is Here on Earth by Alice Hoffman. And I don't know if you guys enjoy hearing me read out loud from the book, or if you just want me to tell you why I like it. So leave me a comment or two and let me know if you want more reading or less. And then, this is the chapter I was talking about. I read this to my husband the other night because I thought it was so beautiful, and he's a writer and I thought he'd appreciate it. This is from chapter 20. When the cold comes to New England, it arrives in sheets of sleet and ice. In December, the wind wraps itself around bare trees and twists in between husbands and wives asleep in their beds. That just gets me. It shakes the shingles from the roofs and sifts through cracks in the plaster, and the only green things left are the holly bushes and the old boxwood hedges in the village, and these are often painted white with snow. Chipmunks and weasels come to nest in basements and barns, and owls find their ways into attics. At night, the dark is blue and bluer still, a sapphire of night. During some winters it is so cold that tears freeze before they fall, and a pony's breath may turn to ice inside its nostrils and lead to suffocation. Doesn't that just describe December in New England so perfectly well? I mean, I don't actually know because I've never been in New England, but I feel like I know what it feels like now just from reading Alice Hoffman's stories. And, that's the kind of description that I would give to, like, a winter in Wyoming or something like that. So, again, Alice Hoffman, Here on Earth. Pick it up. It's a great book. And I will be reviewing more books in the near future of hers, along with a handful of other novels that I kind of feel like are my go-to autumn novels. And I hope you guys enjoy these little book reviews of mine. And I also hope you're having a wonderful Sunday and a wonderful September 1st. And I will review some more books for you guys later.